What's up, I'm Ijemma and welcome back to my channel. In the past two videos, I've been talking about building out an API for an Igbo dictionary, but what I was specifically talking about in those two videos was more of the process of building out a huge JSON object full of Igbo words along with their information. That wasn't so much of an API, instead it was just a huge object with information, but I wanted to still build out an API so it's easier for developers, website services, or anyone to be able to make an endpoint request to get information for a word that they're searching for. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I use Node.js and Express to build a super small API where when you search for a word, you're going to get all the related word information back. This video is assuming that you have some basic low-level understanding of what Node.js is and how Express.js works. So if you're not too familiar or comfortable with these two tools, I suggest that you watch a couple videos or read some articles before you jump back into this video. So with that, let's jump into how I built out this API. So for this API, I wanted to expose some endpoints that developers or services can use to grab access to specific word data. The first thing I did to start my project was create a server.js file that uses Express. So here you can see that at the very top I'm importing Express, and then right on line 7 I'm creating an app using the Express function. After that, I defined some routes that I want my API to be able to handle. So here on line 20 to 21, I'm saying whenever a user requests a / with no other path information after it, the server should just return back the words hello world. After that, on line 27, I tell my app that I want to use a router whenever a user requests the route API version 1 search. This route is specifically dedicated to grabbing data that's living inside of a MongoDB database. And then you can see on line 31 that I'm also saying that I want to use my test router for the route API v1 test. And you can see that this route only exists if I'm not in a production environment. So if I deploy this API for the world to use, this route actually wouldn't exist, so people can't tamper with the test data. And then at the very end, at line 34 to 36, I'm creating a new server that comes from me calling the app's listen function, where I define my port to be 8080, but it's just inside of my port variable. And then I have a callback that tells me if my server started successfully on the port that I defined. So with this setup, if I started my server using Node, I would be able to go to the first route where I should see hello world. So you can see here that I'm printing out just hello world. But let's say that I actually want to request word data when I'm searching for a word. So on the GitHub repo, there is a usage section that tells you how you can get specific words, where if you use API v1, search words, and then use the query keyword to pass in the keyword or the word that you want to search for. So you can see that happening here with line 27, where we have API v1 search, and then I'm passing in my router, which is responsible for handling any subroutes that come from this main route. So if I go into my router file, you can see that I'm actually only defining one route, which is my / words. So whenever someone makes a GET request to the words subroute, I'm going to call this function getWords. So getWords lives inside of my controller's directory. And you can see this is where a lot of the logic for grabbing, organizing, parsing data from the database lives. So you can see here that the function that's getting called is getWords, which is grabbing the data from our MongoDB database. Here you can see that we're taking in two arguments, rec and res. I'm able to pull out my keyword query from rec query. And then right below here, I'm handing a lot of logic that's responsible for being able to handle both English and Igbo terms. On top of that, being able to search into all the phrases that exist within the database. So by the end of the day, these are the two return statements that are responsible for returning data back to the front end. So inside of this if, we're returning get words using English. So if a user provided an English term, they would hop into this if statement and return all the words by searching with English. But if they ended up using Igbo, then we would return all the words and unique parent words that were found from the logic that we defined above. So after we're done with all this logic, we'll either return all the information by using an English term or with an Igbo term. And with this information, you can see that we're sending it back using res.send. And inside of our get words using English function, we're also using res.send to send it back to the client. So this is the logic for MongoDB, but if you wanted to use the JSON dictionary data, there's a separate route that allows you to do that. So looking back in the server.js file, you can see that I have API v1 tests that's using my test router. If I look inside of my test router file, you can see that I'm supporting some extra routes. I have a post populate route, which I'll talk about in another video, and I have my get words route, which is going to use a different function called get word data. getWord data also lives inside of my words controller file. So if I go back to words and I find getWord data, I should see this function. This function is responsible for grabbing data from the JSON dictionary instead of the MongoDB database. So you can see that we're doing something very similar in this case, where we're getting the keyword from our query, and then we're cleaning up that keyword, so we're removing unnecessary prefixed characters. And here what I'm saying is that if the developer never provided a search word or a keyword, then we're going to return back a 400 error saying that there's no provided term. But assuming that the developer was actually looking for a term, we want to create a regular expression, which I talked about in a previous video, that we can use for searching for all matches inside of our JSON dictionary. We can take a quick look at this find search function. It seems like a lot of stuff is going on here, but essentially what we're doing is we're taking advantage of the regex word and cleaning it up and using it to find all the matches that are present inside of our dictionary object, which you can see here is database dictionary, which is just our IGEN_expanded JSON dictionary. So once we find all the matches, we're going to get an array of all the words and we're going to send it back over to the client. So to show you how this works, I'm going to go back to localhost 8080 and I'm going to use search words. This means that I'm using my MongoDB database and I'm going to be looking up the term bia. I'm going to switch over to Firefox to make it easier to see the structure of this data. We can see here that I have an array that's full of 4 word objects. So for the first word object, you can see its definitions, its phrases along with its definitions, examples, its phrase, and the parent word along with its own ID. And you can see how this information can go on for a long time. You can also see for this word object, not only does it have its definitions and phrases, but also has examples, variations, its actual word, and its word class along with its ID. And you can see the structure happening for all word objects that were returned inside of this array. So again, we have definitions, phrases, examples, variations, word class, and ID. So this is me using the MongoDB database, but if I wanted to use my local JSON dictionary, I could switch out search with test. So now that I'm using my test route, I'm using the JSON dictionary, and you can see that the structure of this information is actually quite different. Instead of getting an array of word objects, I'm just getting one massive object where each of its keys is the different word. So you can see with the first key, I have some information like its word class, definitions, examples, phrases. And then for the second key in the object, I have the same keys, but with different values. So the reason why the JSON dictionary is still in use, despite the fact that it has a different shape than the MongoDB data, is because that it's acting as a source of truth. The MongoDB database is populated using the JSON dictionary by a special script. So the moment that we delete the JSON dictionary, then we delete the source of truth of how the information or data should be formatted. But what I want to do probably down the road is change the JSON dictionary shape so it matches the shape that is found inside of the MongoDB database. But with all of that, this is how I set up a API using Node.js and Express. And I think it's a nice way to allow developers to query for keywords in either Igbo or English to get the appropriate word information. But that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching up until this point. If you want to contribute to this project, I have a link to the GitHub down below, or if you have any feature requests, you can open up an issue. You can also talk to me about this project on GitHub down in the comment section below, or you can send me a DM on Twitter. We can have a cool conversation about this, JavaScript, or anything in between. But with that, I'll see you on the next one.